Deliveries are through the back entrance, miss.
The words hit Zara Williams like a slap across the face, but her expression didn't change. At 19, she had heard variations of this sentence more times than she cared to count. She stood at the marble reception desk of JFK International Airport's Platinum Elite Lounge, her worn canvas backpack slung over one shoulder, vintage university hoodie, slightly too big sneakers that had seen better days. To Jennifer Walsh, the blonde receptionist with perfectly manicured nails, Zara looked like she had wandered into the wrong zip code. "I'm not delivering anything," Zara replied, her voice steady and calm. "I'm flying first class." Jennifer's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Sure, you are, sweetheart." The automatic glass doors behind them hissed open and closed as legitimate passengers entered the lounge. Men in tailored suits, women carrying designer handbags, the kind of people Jennifer was used to seeing. Not teenagers in thrift store clothing. Zara reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone, displaying her boarding pass on the screen. She placed it gently on the marble counter right next to the fresh orchid arrangement that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Flight AV 880 to Heathrow," Zara said. "Seat 1A. Jennifer picked up the phone with two fingers as if it might be contaminated. She glanced at the screen, expecting to see an economy boarding pass that had somehow gotten lost. Her eyes widened as she read the information displayed. Passenger Williams, Zara status, Royal. Key Elite cabin first class. Owner's suite, seat 1. The Royal Key Elite status wasn't something you could buy. It was invitation only reserved for heads of state, A-list celebrities or board members. Jennifer had been working the lounge for 3 years and had seen the status maybe a dozen times. I apologize, Miss Williams." Jennifer stammered, her face flushing deep crimson. "The system usually alerts us when Royal Key passengers arrive. Please come in. Can I get you champagne? Sparkling water?" "Perhaps some caviar. Water is fine," Zara said, taking her phone back. She didn't make a scene, didn't demand an apology, didn't lecture Jennifer about assumptions. She just wanted to sit down and sketch in peace. The Platinum Elite Lounge stretched out before her like a small luxury hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the tarmac where massive aircraft moved like graceful giants. Zara loved watching them. The engineering fascinated her, the sheer miracle of heavy metal taking flight. She found a secluded corner seat by the windows, perfect for observing both the aircraft outside and the people inside. She pulled out her sketchbook, a battered leather journal filled with drawings of planes, faces, moments that caught her eye. Art was her language, her way of processing the world. At 19, she was already being courted by several prestigious art schools, though she hadn't told her father about the acceptance letters yet. David Williams worried enough about her as it is. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dad, flight on time. "Remember, if anyone gives you trouble, call me immediately." Zara smiled and typed back, "All good so far. Lounge receptionist thought I was kitchen staff, but we sorted it out. Taking off soon? Love you?" The reply came quickly. "Tell them to check the file if they bother you. Fly safe, bug. Love you too." Jennifer appeared at her side with a crystal glass of sparkling water and a small plate of artisanal cookies. "Again, my sincere apologies, Miss Williams. Is there anything else I can bring you?" "This is perfect, thank you," Zara said, accepting the water with grace. Jennifer hurried away, probably to update the computer system and figure out how she had missed such an important passenger. Zara opened her sketchbook to a fresh page and began drawing the scene outside her window. A massive Boeing 777 was being pushed back from its gate, its engines beginning their warm-up cycle. The ground crew worked with choreographed precision, each person knowing their role in getting the aircraft ready for flight. There was beauty in the coordination and the trust required to make aviation work. The lounge was quiet except for the soft murmur of conversation and the gentle hum of air conditioning. Business travelers typed on laptops, made phone calls in hushed tones, or simply relaxed in the comfortable chairs. This was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where the chaos of commercial aviation couldn't reach. Zara's pencil moved across the paper, capturing the lines of the aircraft. the movement of the ground crew, the way sunlight reflected off the terminal windows. She lost herself in the work the way she always did. Art was her escape, her way of finding peace in a world that often seemed determined to see her as out of place. A movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Jennifer was back at the reception desk, and someone was clearly unhappy about something. The woman's voice was rising, sharp and demanding, cutting through the lounge's calm atmosphere like a knife through silk. "This is absolutely ridiculous," the voice declared. "Do you know who my husband is?" Zara looked up from her sketch. Standing at the reception desk was a woman who looked like she was vibrating with tension. Mid-40s, platinum blonde hair styled into perfect waves, wearing a white Chanel suit that looked like it had never been worn before. Her handbag was a Birkin, the kind that cost more than most people's cars. This was clearly someone who was used to getting her way. "I specifically requested the window seat in row 1. The woman continued, her voice rising with each word. "My assistant confirmed it weeks ago, Mrs. Pemberton. I understand your frustration," Jennifer said, her voice trembling with nervous energy, "but as I explained, seat 1A was booked months in advance. We have you in 1B, which is an aisle seat right next to it with exactly the same service level." "I don't do aisles," the woman, Mrs. Pemberton, snapped. "I get claustrophobic. I need the window." "Who is in 1A? Move them." "I can't do that, ma'am. The passenger's already checked in and has royal key status." Zara's pencil stopped moving. She had a sinking feeling about where this conversation was heading. Mrs. Pemberton turned, scanning the lounge with eyes that looked like predatory searchlights. Her gaze swept over the businessmen in their expensive suits, the elderly couple sharing afternoon tea, the woman reading a financial newspaper. Then her eyes landed on Zara in the corner, and her expression changed. Zara with her hoodie and backpack. Zara with her thrift store aesthetic and comfortable sneakers. Zara, who was young and black and clearly didn't fit Mrs. Pemberton's idea of who belonged in first class. "Is the flight full, Mrs.?" Pemberton asked, still staring at Zara. "First class is completely booked, ma'am," Jennifer replied. Mrs. Pemberton didn't respond. She straightened her blazer, smoothed her hair, and walked to the buffet area, pouring herself a mimosa with deliberate movements. But Zara could feel the weight of that stare, the calculation behind those eyes. Zara put her headphones back on and turned up the volume, trying to block out the tension that had suddenly filled the room. She sent another text to her father. "Might need that call after all. Some woman wants my seat." The response came back immediately. "Say the word, I'll handle it." Zara hoped she wouldn't have to make that call. She hated using her father's name, hated the way it changed how people treated her. She wanted to be Zara the artist, not Zara the CEO's daughter. But as she watched Mrs. Pemberton's reflection in the window, mimosa in hand, and calculation in her eyes, she had a feeling this flight was going to be anything but peaceful. The lounge's PA system crackled to life, "Good morning, passengers. First-class boarding for Flight AV 880 to London Heathrow will begin in 15 minutes at Gate B12. Zara closed her sketchbook and gathered her things. It was time to face whatever Mrs. Pemberton had planned. Victoria Pemberton had never been told no in her life, and she wasn't about to start accepting it now. At 47, Victoria had perfected the art of getting her way through a combination of money, influence, and sheer force of will. Her husband, Charles Pemberton, owned Pemberton Logistics, one of the largest shipping companies on the East Coast. Their wealth had opened every door, smoothed every path, and eliminated every obstacle she had ever encountered. Until today. Standing at the buffet with her mimosa, Victoria studied the lounge like a general surveying a battlefield. The elderly couple by the window were clearly wealthy. The woman's jewelry alone was worth more than most people's houses. The businessmen were potential board members or executives. These people had earned their place in first class, but the girl in the corner, the one with the ratty backpack and the hoodie that looked like it came from a discount store, that was obviously a mistake. Victoria pulled out her phone and speed-dialed her husband's office. Charles answered on the first ring. "Victoria, aren't you supposed to be boarding soon, Charles?" I need you to make a call, Victoria said, her voice tight with controlled frustration. Some girl is in my seat and the airline staff is being completely unreasonable about moving her. What do you mean, your seat? I thought you had 1B. I specifically requested 1A. You know I can't fly aisle seats. The claustrophobia is unbearable. This girl clearly doesn't belong in first class. I mean, look at her. She's probably using a stolen credit card or something. Charles sighed. Victoria, you can't just accuse people of credit card fraud because they don't dress the way you expect. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Victoria said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm just saying that legitimate first-class passengers don't show up looking like they're heading to a homeless shelter. Call Robert Harrison's office. He owes you favors, and I want this sorted out. Robert Harrison was the CEO of the airline. Charles and Victoria had donated to his children's private school fundraiser last year, and Victoria considered that a debt to be collected when necessary. I'll see what I can do, Charles said, but Victoria, please don't make a scene. The last thing we need is bad publicity. Victoria hung up without saying goodbye. Bad publicity was exactly what the airline would get if they didn't fix this situation. She had social media followers, connections in the press, and a very clear understanding of how to make corporate executives uncomfortable. She walked back to the reception desk where Jennifer was trying to look busy by organizing brochures that were already perfectly arranged. I've spoken with my husband, Victoria announced. He's calling Robert Harrison's office directly. I expect the situation to be resolved before we board. Jennifer's face went pale. Robert Harrison was several levels above anyone she had ever spoken to at the company. If Mrs. Pemberton really had that kind of connection, Jennifer's job could be in jeopardy. Mrs. Pemberton, I wish I could help you, but Royal Key status takes priority over all other requests. I simply don't have the authority to move a Royal Key passenger. Then get someone who does have the authority, Victoria snapped. I'm not getting on that plane unless I have the window seat I requested. Carlos Rivera, the lounge manager, had been watching the conversation from his office doorway. At 38, Carlos had seen every type of entitled passenger the airline industry had to offer. He approached the desk with the diplomatic smile he used for difficult situations. Good morning, Mrs. Pemberton. I'm Carlos Rivera, the lounge manager. Jennifer briefed me on your situation. I completely understand your concerns about the seating arrangement. Finally, Victoria said, someone with sense. I need you to move whoever is in 1A to another seat, preferably coach where they belong. Carlos's smile never wavered, but Zara could see the tension in his shoulders from across the room. I'm afraid that's not possible, ma'am. The passenger in 1A has our highest tier of elite status. Moving a Royal Key passenger would violate our service agreements. Royal Key status. Victoria's voice rose an octave. That girl is 19 years old. How could she possibly have Royal Key status? Age isn't a factor in our elite programs, Carlos explained patiently. Royal Key status is typically extended to family members of board members, major corporate partners, or individuals who have made significant contributions to the company. Victoria turned to stare at Zara again, who was now standing near the boarding area, with her backpack calmly checking her phone. The idea that this teenager could have legitimate first-class status was incomprehensible to Victoria. In her world, status was earned through marriage inheritance or business success, none of which applied to college-age girls in thrift store clothing. There has to be a mistake, Victoria insisted. Run the credit card, check for fraud. I guarantee you'll find something wrong with her booking. Mrs. Pemberton. Carlos said carefully, I cannot and will not run unauthorized credit checks on our passengers based on their appearance. That would be both illegal and against company policy. Victoria's face flushed red. Are you suggesting that I'm discriminating against her? I'm not suggesting anything, ma'am. I'm simply explaining that we cannot move a Royal Key passenger based on another passenger's seating preferences. The PA system crackled again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning first-class boarding for Flight AV 880 to London Heathrow. All first-class passengers may now proceed to Gate B12. Zara gathered her things and walked toward the exit. Victoria watched her every step, her mind racing with plans and strategies. If the airline wouldn't move the girl voluntarily, Victoria would find another way to get her window seat. "This isn't over," Victoria told Carlos. "My husband has significant influence with this airline. You'll be hearing from corporate before we land." Carlos maintained his professional smile as Victoria stormed out of the lounge, but he had a sinking feeling that Flight AV 880 was going to be anything but routine. He pulled out his radio and contacted the gate agent. "Linda, this is Carlos in the Platinum Lounge. We have a potential situation developing with Flight 880. Passenger in 1B is extremely agitated about the seating assignment. Might want to give the crew a heads up." "Copy that, Carlos. I'll brief Carmen when she arrives." As the lounge emptied for boarding, Jennifer slumped in her chair. "That woman is going to get someone fired before this is over," she muttered. Carlos nodded grimly. In his 15 years with the airline, he had seen passenger disputes escalate to incredible levels. The combination of wealth entitlement and cramped aircraft cabins created a perfect storm for conflict. And Victoria Pemberton looked like the eye of a hurricane waiting to make landfall. The jet bridge stretched ahead like a tunnel to trouble. Zara walked down the carpeted corridor, her sneakers silent against the floor. The cool air conditioning carried the familiar scent of aircraft fuel and cleaning supplies, a smell she'd grown to love over the years of flying with her father on business trips. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant with tired eyes and a forced smile waited to scan boarding passes. Her name tag read Carmen Rodriguez, and at 42, Carmen had been flying for 20 years. She had seen it all: drunk passengers, medical emergencies, weather delays, and every variety of entitled traveler the skies had to offer. But lately, the job felt more like customer service hell than the glamorous career she had once imagined. "Boarding pass," Carmen said without making eye contact, her scanner ready. Zara held out her phone. Carmen glanced at the screen, expecting to see another standard first-class boarding pass. Instead, she saw something that made her pause. Royal Key Elite, Seat 1A. Carmen looked up at Zara, really looked at her for the first time. 19 years old, black, wearing clothes that belonged in a college dorm room, not a premium cabin. Carmen's mental programming kicked in immediately. Young black woman in first class equals potential problem. Either stolen credit card, employee family flying on benefits, or some kind of mistake that would need to be sorted out. "1, a left side window," Carmen said, waving Zara through while making a mental note to keep an eye on the situation. Zara stepped into the cabin of the AirVantage A350. The first-class section was stunning. Not just seats, but individual suites with sliding privacy doors, lie-flat beds, and personal entertainment systems. Seat 1A was the crown jewel, offering maximum privacy and the best views. Zara stowed her backpack in the overhead bin, took off her hoodie to reveal a simple white t-shirt underneath, and settled into the plush leather seat. She was just pulling out her sketchbook when the atmosphere in the cabin shifted like a storm front moving in. Victoria Pemberton had arrived. She entered the aircraft like she owned it, bringing a cloud of heavy floral perfume and an energy that made everyone look up. Her Chanel suit was pristine, her jewelry caught the cabin lights, and her Birkin bag was positioned like a weapon of mass destruction. She stopped abruptly at row 1, staring at the seat numbers as if they had personally offended her. 1A, window seat. Occupied by a teenager in a t-shirt. 1B, aisle seat. Empty and waiting for her. Victoria stood in the aisle, blocking the flow of passengers, and stared directly at Zara. The privacy door to 1A was still open, giving Victoria a clear view of her target. "Excuse me," Victoria said loudly, her voice carrying across the first-class cabin. "You're in my seat." Zara looked up from her sketchbook, her expression calm and patient. "I don't think so. This is 1A. I'm assigned to 1A. Victoria laughed a dry, humorless sound that made other passengers turn to watch. "There's been a mistake. I specifically requested this seat weeks ago." "Then you should check your boarding pass," Zara replied evenly. "Because mine says 1A. Victoria's face flushed. She snapped her fingers at Carmen, who was helping another passenger with their coat. "Stewardess, we have a situation here." Carmen hurried over immediately. She saw Victoria, expensive clothes, premium jewelry, commanding presence, and her posture straightened into automatic deference. Rich passengers meant better performance reviews, fewer complaints, and the possibility of tips. Then she looked at Zara, and her bias calculus was complete. "What seems to be the problem, Mrs.?" Pemberton Carmen asked, having checked the passenger manifest during pre-boarding. "This girl is in my seat," Victoria said, her voice rising just enough to ensure the entire first-class cabin could hear. "I need her moved immediately." Carmen felt a familiar tension in her stomach. These situations never ended well, but she knew which passenger the airline would expect her to prioritize. "Let me check both boarding passes and see what we can work out." Zara handed over her phone without argument. The royal key status was clearly visible on the screen, along with her seat assignment 1A. Victoria produced a paper boarding pass with a flourish. Seat 1B, aisle. Carmen stared at both documents, her mind racing. Company policy was crystal clear. Royal key passengers could not be moved except for safety reasons. But Victoria Pemberton looked like the type of person who could make Carmen's life miserable with a single phone call to corporate. "Mrs. Pemberton Carmen said carefully, "Your assigned seat is 1B, which is right here next to 1A. Same row, same service level, just aisle instead of window." "I specifically requested the window," Victoria snapped. "I have severe claustrophobia. Aisle seats trigger my anxiety. I cannot and will not fly in an aisle seat." Mike Torres, another flight attendant, approached the growing disturbance. At 31, Mike had learned that the path of least resistance usually meant siding with whoever looked like they had the most money and influence. "Is everything okay here?" Mike asked. "No, everything is not okay," Victoria said. "I'm being discriminated against because of my medical condition. I need the window seat, and this girl needs to be moved to coach where she belongs." Zara's pencil stopped moving across her sketchbook. The cabin had gone quiet, all conversations pausing as passengers tuned into the drama unfolding in row 1. "Ma'am," Zara said, her voice steady and clear. "I paid for this seat. I'm staying in this seat." "Paid for it," how Victoria shot back. "With what money? You're 19 years old, wearing clothes from Goodwill. How exactly did you afford a $5,000 first-class ticket?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably. An elderly white couple in 1C and 1D whispered to each other. A Hispanic businessman in 2A pulled out his phone and began discreetly recording. Zara felt the familiar heat on the back of her neck, the same sensation she had experienced in the lounge with Jennifer. But this time, there was nowhere to retreat. She was trapped in her seat with a cabin full of witnesses and a flight attendant who clearly wasn't going to defend her. "How I pay for my tickets is not your business," Zara replied, her voice calm but firm. "Just like your financial situation is not mine." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart with me, young lady. I know exactly what this is. You probably used someone else's credit card or booked with stolen miles. People like you always find a way to get things you haven't earned." The racist undertone in Victoria's words was unmistakable. The Hispanic businessman in 2A raised his phone higher, making sure he captured everything. A white tech executive in 2B opened Instagram and began live-streaming, his viewer count already climbing. Carmen knew she was watching her career potentially explode in real time. Whatever decision she made next would determine whether she kept her job or became the subject of a viral discrimination video. "Let me contact the captain," Carmen said, reaching for her radio. "Captain Bradley can sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out," Zara said firmly. "I have a ticket. I have a seat assignment. I'm not moving." Victoria pulled out her phone and speed-dialed her husband. "Charles." "Yes, I'm on the plane now. The situation is even worse than I thought. This girl is being completely unreasonable and the crew isn't helping at all. Yes, call Robert Harrison immediately. Tell him I want this handled at the highest level." As Victoria spoke, her voice growing louder and more agitated with each word, the tech executive's live-stream viewer count hit 10,000 and kept climbing. The comments section was already exploding with reactions. "WTF is wrong with that lady? Move your entitled ass to your assigned seat. Karen, that girl has more class than this rich witch." "Someone's about to get dragged." Zara sat quietly in her seat sketchbook in her lap and watched the storm gather around her. She had a choice to make. She could call her father and end this immediately, or she could see how far Victoria Pemberton was willing to take her tantrum. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. "It's happening. They're backing her." The reply came instantly. "Say the word bug. I can end this with one phone call." Zara looked around the cabin at all the watching faces at the cameras recording at Carmen's conflicted expression. Maybe it was time for some people to learn that assumptions could be expensive. "Not yet," she texted back. But soon. Captain Thomas Bradley had been flying commercial aircraft for 32 years, and he thought he had seen every possible passenger conflict. He was wrong. The radio crackled in the cockpit as Carmen's voice came through strained and urgent. "Captain Bradley, we have a situation in first class. Passenger dispute over seating. Mrs. Pemberton is requesting to speak with you directly." Thomas sighed and unbuckled his harness. Passenger disputes were the worst part of the job. No matter how you resolved them, someone ended up angry and writing complaint letters. He made his way to the cabin, expecting to find a typical rich passenger having a meltdown over seat assignments. What he found was worse. Victoria Pemberton stood in the aisle, blocking traffic, her face red with indignation, pointing at Zara like she was identifying a criminal in a lineup. Carmen and Mike flanked her like backup dancers, both looking increasingly uncomfortable, but clearly taking Victoria's side. Captain Bradley Victoria announced loudly, "Thank God you're here. I need this situation resolved immediately. This girl has taken my seat and your crew is refusing to move her." Thomas looked at the scene, an obviously wealthy woman in designer clothes versus a teenager in casual wear. His mental calculus was instantaneous and biased. Wealthy passenger equals important passenger equals passenger who could cost him his job if she complained to the wrong people. Miss Thomas said to Zara, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in aviation, "We need you to move to available seating so we can resolve this issue and depart on time." Zara looked up at him with calm, steady eyes. "Captain, I'm in my assigned seat with a valid boarding pass. Why would I need to move?" "Because," Victoria interjected, "I have a medical condition that requires a window seat, and I specifically requested this seat when I booked my flight." Thomas glanced at Carmen, who nodded eagerly. "Mrs. Pemberton has documented claustrophobia, Captain. She's been very clear about her medical needs." What Carmen didn't mention was that Victoria's medical documentation consisted of a self-diagnosis and a demand for accommodation. There was no doctor's note, no official medical certification, just Victoria's insistence that she needed special treatment. Miss Thomas said to Zara again, "I'm sure we can find you another first-class seat that will be perfectly comfortable." "Actually, you can't," Zara replied calmly, "because first class is sold out." Carmen confirmed that herself 20 minutes ago. The tech executive in 2B had his Instagram live viewer count climbing past 25,000. The comments were pouring in faster than he could read them. "This is insane. That captain is a joke. Stand your ground, girl. Where is this happening? Someone call the news." Thomas felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. A delayed departure meant missed connections, angry passengers, and reports to corporate explaining why his flight was late. The easiest solution was to move the teenager to coach and comp her ticket, standard operating procedure for overselling situations. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you one more time to cooperate with crew instructions," Thomas said, his voice taking on the official tone he used for unruly passengers. "If you refuse, we'll have to call security." The words hung in the air like a threat. Zara felt every eye in first class focused on her. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment when quiet compliance became impossible. "Captain Zara," said her voice clear and steady, "are you threatening to have me removed for sitting in the seat I paid for?" "I'm asking you to be reasonable," Thomas replied. "And I'm asking you to follow your own policies," Zara shot back. "Check my boarding pass, check my status. Then explain to me why a medical condition that isn't documented anywhere trumps a confirmed seat assignment." Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Charles Robert Harrison's office says their hands are tied on seat assignments. Handle this yourself or get off the plane. Her husband was abandoning her. The airline CEO wasn't taking her calls, and this teenager was making her look like a fool in front of a cabin full of witnesses. Victoria felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. "This is discrimination," Victoria announced to the cabin. "I'm being discriminated against because of my medical disability, and this crew is enabling it." The irony was lost on no one. The Hispanic businessman in 2A muttered to his seatmate, "Lady, you're the one discriminating." Carmen's radio crackled with a call from the gate. "Carmen, this is Linda at the gate. We're showing a 15-minute delay for departure." "What's your status?" "We have a passenger situation," Carmen replied, her voice tight. "Still working on resolution." "Copy that. Keep me posted." Every minute of delay meant more scrutiny from corporate, more passenger complaints, and more pressure on Carmen to fix the problem quickly. She made a decision that would cost her everything. "Captain, I recommend we call airport security to resolve this matter," Carmen said loudly enough for the entire cabin to hear. "The passenger in 1A is being uncooperative and disrupting the boarding process." A collective gasp went through the cabin. The elderly couple in 1C looked shocked. The businessman in 2A started recording with both his phone and a backup device. The tech executive's live stream viewer count hit 50,000. "Are you serious right now?" Zara asked her calm, finally cracking just enough to show disbelief. "You're calling security on me for sitting in my assigned seat." "You're disrupting the flight," Mike added, backing up Carmen's decision. "Security can escort you to a different seat or off the aircraft entirely." Zara felt her phone buzz with another text from her father. "Bug, what's happening? I'm seeing social media posts about a situation on your flight." The story was already spreading beyond the aircraft. Someone had shared the live stream and it was being reshared across multiple platforms. Seatgate was starting to trend. "I'm calling security now," Carmen announced, reaching for her radio. That's when Zara made her decision. She pulled up her father's contact on her phone and hit call. "Carmen," she said quietly, "someone wants to talk to you." The phone rang twice before David Williams answered. "Hey, Bug, are you okay, Dad? I need you to talk to the flight attendant. They're calling security on me for sitting in my seat." Zara held out her phone to Carmen. "He'd like to speak with you." Carmen took the phone reluctantly, assuming she was about to deal with an angry parent who would threaten lawsuits and demand compensation. She had handled hundreds of these calls. "This is Carmen Rodriguez, lead flight attendant on Flight AV 880, she said in her professional voice. "How can I help you?" The voice on the other end was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying. "Miss Rodriguez, this is David Williams, CEO of Williams Aviation. I believe you're harassing my daughter." Carmen's face went white. Williams Aviation was one of the largest aircraft leasing companies in the world. They owned 40% of the planes her airline used, including the one she was standing in. Mr. Williams, I didn't realize. You didn't realize that my daughter had the right to sit in the seat she paid for, that calling security on a paying passenger for the crime of being young and black might be problematic." The phone was loud enough that several nearby passengers could hear both sides of the conversation. Victoria, who had been preparing to celebrate her victory, suddenly looked like she was going to be sick. "Mr. Williams, there's been a misunderstanding," Carmen stammered. "No misunderstanding." David's voice came through crystal clear. "You've just live-streamed racial profiling to 75,000 viewers. Williams Aviation owns the aircraft you're standing in. We lease it to your airline under contracts that include non-discrimination clauses. You have exactly 60 seconds to fix this situation before I start making phone calls that will end careers." Carmen's hands shook as she held the phone. 20 years of aviation experience, and she was about to lose it all because she had assumed a young black woman didn't belong in first class. Victoria backed away slowly, her face pale, finally understanding the magnitude of her mistake. The tech executive's live stream was approaching 100,000 viewers, and the comment section was exploding with recognition of David Williams' name. "Oh shit, that's the David Williams. Williams, aviation owns like half the planes in America. That flight attendant is so fired, Karen picked the wrong family to mess with." The elderly couple in 1C was staring openly now. The businessman in 2A was grinning as he recorded everything. Captain Bradley stood frozen in the aisle, realizing his career had just taken a nosedive at 30,000 feet. "Mr. Williams Carmen," said her voice barely above a whisper, "what would you like me to do? I'd like you to apologize to my daughter, return to your duties, and pray that your employee handbook has a good severance package. Then I'd like to speak with your captain." Carmen handed the phone to Thomas Bradley with shaking hands. His face was already ashen. He had heard enough to know his 32-year career was over. "Captain Bradley speaking," he said into the phone. "Captain, you just threatened to have my daughter removed from a seat she legally occupied because a racist passenger threw a tantrum. Williams Aviation holds a lease on this aircraft. We have termination clauses for discrimination incidents. Would you like to explain to me why you took the side of bias over policy?" Thomas looked around the cabin at all the recording devices at Victoria, cowering by the beverage cart at Zara, sitting calmly in her seat like the eye of a hurricane. "Sir, there was a dispute about seat assignments." "There was no dispute. There was my daughter sitting in her assigned seat, and a crew that decided her skin color made her less worthy of first-class service. The entire incident is being live-streamed. Your airline stock price is about to take a hit and your employment status just became very uncertain." The cabin was dead silent except for the ambient aircraft noise. Every passenger was recording, streaming, or texting about what they were witnessing. Mr. Williams Thomas said desperately, "How can we make this right? You can start." David Williams said, his voice carrying the weight of corporate authority, "By treating my daughter with the respect she deserves. Then you can explain to your supervisors why this flight is about to become the most expensive publicity disaster in aviation history." The phone call that was supposed to save Carmen's career had just destroyed it instead. As Captain Bradley handed the phone back to Zara with trembling hands, airport security arrived at the aircraft door. Officer James Murphy, a 38-year-old veteran with 15 years of airport experience, stepped into the first-class cabin followed by his partner, Officer Sophia Martinez. Murphy had responded to hundreds of passenger disputes over the years. Drunk travelers' fare dodgers, people trying to sneak into premium cabins. He expected this to be routine remove unruly passenger file paperwork, move on to the next call. What he found was a cabin full of people with phones pointed at a teenager sitting calmly in her seat, while 3 crew members looked like they were attending their own funeral. "We got a call about an uncooperative passenger," Murphy announced to the cabin. "Who's the problem?" Carmen pointed at Zara with a shaking finger. "She's refusing to move from seat 1A. The passenger with the medical condition needs the window seat." Sophia Martinez, Murphy's partner, was younger and more observant. At 29, she had seen enough discrimination cases to recognize the pattern young person of color in expensive setting equals automatic suspicion. She looked at Zara, who was holding her phone and looking remarkably composed for someone who was supposedly causing a disturbance. "Miss, can you show me your boarding pass?" Sophia asked professionally. Zara handed over her phone without argument. Sophia's eyebrows rose as she read the screen. "Royal Key Elite status, seat 1A, paid in full." "Ma'am," Sophia said to Victoria, "can I see your boarding pass as well?" Victoria produced her paper boarding pass with shaking hands. "Seat 1B, aisle." Sophia looked between the 2 documents, then at her partner. Something wasn't adding up. "So, you called security because a passenger is sitting in her assigned seat." "She's supposed to move for medical accommodation," Carmen said quickly. "Do you have documentation of the medical condition requiring specific seating?" Sophia asked. The question hung in the air unanswered. Victoria had no medical documentation because there was no real medical condition, just her preference for window seats and her belief that she could bully a teenager into giving up what she wanted. Murphy was getting impatient. "Look, we don't have time for this. Someone needs to move so this flight can leave." Officer Murphy Zara said calmly, "I'd like to file a discrimination complaint." Murphy blinked in surprise. "Against who?" "Against the crew members who called you to remove me from my paid seat based on my appearance." Sophia pulled out her incident report tablet. She had been trained in discrimination protocols, and Zara's calm professionalism was setting off alarm bells. Miss, can you walk me through what happened here? I boarded the aircraft and sat in my assigned seat, Zara explained clearly. Mrs. Pemberton demanded I move because she wanted the window. When I declined, the crew threatened to have me removed despite the fact that I have valid documentation and the highest tier of elite status with this airline. The tech executive's Instagram live viewer count had passed 150,000. Comments were flooding in from around the world as the stream was shared across social platforms. This is happening right now on a plane. That girl is so calm and collected, the crew should be arrested. Someone identify that racist woman, David Williams' daughter. Of course she has royal key status. Sophia was reading the comments on her own phone while taking notes. Miss Williams, did the crew ask for any additional verification beyond your boarding pass? They questioned how I could afford the ticket, Zara replied. Mrs. Pemberton accused me of using a stolen credit card. Victoria's face flushed. I never said that exactly. Ma'am? Sophia said to Victoria, did you question this passenger's right to her seat based on her appearance or age? Victoria looked around the cabin at all the recording devices at the 150,000 people watching live at her husband's threatening texts and realized she was trapped in a web of her own making. I just wanted my medical accommodation, Victoria said weakly. What medical accommodation? Sophia asked. Where's your documentation? Murphy was scrolling through social media on his phone and realizing this situation was exploding far beyond a simple passenger dispute. Seatgate was trending nationally. Videos from inside the cabin were being shared thousands of times. The airline's official Twitter account was being bombarded with angry messages. Partner Murphy said to Sophia, I think we need to step back and reassess this situation. That's when David Williams called back. Zara's phone rang and she answered on speaker so everyone could hear. Bug, are you okay? I'm seeing this all over social media now. I'm fine, Dad. Airport security is here. Put one of the officers on the phone. Sophia took the phone. This is Officer Martinez, Airport Security. Officer Martinez, this is David Williams, CEO of Williams Aviation. I need to inform you that you're dealing with a case of racial profiling that's being live-streamed to hundreds of thousands of viewers. My daughter is being harassed for sitting in her legally purchased seat. Sophia's training kicked in. Mr. Williams, I understand your concerns. We're sorting out the facts right now. The facts are simple. David's voice came through crystal clear. My daughter has a royal key boarding pass for seat 1A. She's being threatened with removal because another passenger wants her seat. This is discrimination and it's being recorded. Murphy looked around the cabin nervously. He had never dealt with anything close to this level of visibility. Sir, we're just responding to a crew request for assistance, and I'm informing you that the crew request was based on racial bias. Williams Aviation leases aircraft to this airline. We have zero-tolerance policies for discrimination. This incident is going to result in contract reviews and employment terminations. Victoria finally spoke up, her voice desperate. I didn't know who she was. How was I supposed to know she was important? The comment landed like a bomb. Even Murphy winced at the implications. Ma'am? Sophia said carefully, are you saying your behavior would have been different if you had known the passenger's identity? Victoria realized her mistake too late. I just wanted my seat. Her seat is 1B, Zara said quietly. It's clearly marked on her boarding pass. The Hispanic businessman in 2A was live streaming on his own platform, now providing Spanish-language commentary for viewers across Latin America. The elderly couple in 1C had their phones out recording everything for their grandchildren. The viral moment was being captured from multiple angles and shared across the globe. David Williams' voice came through the phone again, addressing the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, my daughter Zara is a royal key passenger with Williams Aviation. She has every right to be in that seat. The crew members who called security based on her appearance will be terminated. The airline executives who allowed this to happen will face consequences, and Mrs. Pemberton will be banned from all Williams Aviation partner airlines. Victoria's knees buckled. Williams Aviation partnered with virtually every major airline in North America and Europe. Being banned from their partner network would effectively end her ability to fly first class anywhere. "You can't do that," Victoria whispered. "Watch me," David replied. "Officer Martinez, I'm sending corporate security to meet this aircraft when it lands. This incident will be thoroughly investigated." Sophia looked at her partner, then at the crew, then at the dozens of recording devices capturing every word. "Mr. Williams, we're going to file a report on this incident. It appears your daughter was subjected to discriminatory treatment. Thank you, Officer Martinez. And officers. The passenger in seat 1B needs to be moved to coach. First class is reserved for people who can behave with dignity." Murphy nodded. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to gather your things and move to your assigned seat in coach." "I don't have a coach seat," Victoria protested. "I'm first class," Sophia checked her tablet. "Ma'am, according to the manifest, you have seat 1B. If you're not comfortable in that seat, we can arrange alternate accommodations in the main cabin." Carmen finally found her voice. "We don't have any available coach seats. Then Mrs. Pemberton can take the next flight." David's voice came through the phone with finality. "This aircraft doesn't depart with her on it." The tech executive's live stream hit 200,000 viewers as Victoria's public meltdown reached its peak. Comments were pouring in faster than the platform could display them. "Get her off the plane. Rich people think they own everything. That girl handled this like a boss. David Williams is a legend. Justice being served in real time." Captain Bradley stepped forward, his career already over, but hoping to minimize the damage. "Mr. Williams will remove Mrs. Pemberton from the aircraft immediately." "Too little too late," Captain David replied. "You threatened to remove my daughter for being black in first class. Your employment with this airline ends today." Carmen began crying openly. 20 years of flying, and she had destroyed her career in 20 minutes because she couldn't see past her own bias. Sir Carmen sobbed, "I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," David corrected. "You chose to side with prejudice over policy. You chose appearance over facts. You chose discrimination over dignity. That choice has consequences." Sophia and Murphy escorted Victoria off the aircraft as she protested loudly about her rights, her husband's influence, and the unfairness of the situation. Her complaints were recorded by dozens of phones and shared instantly across social media. As the aircraft door closed behind them, the first-class cabin erupted in applause. The Hispanic businessman shouted "Bravo!" The elderly couple clapped enthusiastically. The tech executive's live-stream chat was filled with celebration emojis. Zara sat quietly in her seat, sketchbook in her lap, and called her father back. "Thank you, Dad," she said softly. "You don't thank family for doing the right thing, Bug. Are you okay? I'm okay. Just tired. Get some rest on the flight. And Zara, I'm proud of you for standing your ground." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Zara opened her sketchbook and began drawing the scene she had just lived through. Not the anger or the confrontation, but the moment when justice finally spoke louder than bias. The drawing would become the centerpiece of her first solo art exhibition, Altitude and Attitude Dignity, at 30,000 feet. The aircraft finally pushed back from the gate 3 hours behind schedule, but the real turbulence was just beginning. As Flight AV 880 climbed toward the cruising altitude, the story of Zara Williams was exploding across every social media platform on Earth. The tech executive's Instagram Live had peaked at over 400,000 simultaneous viewers before ending, but dozens of other passengers had captured pieces of the confrontation from different angles. Seatgate was trending worldwide. Justice for Zara was climbing the charts. First-class Karen had turned Victoria Pemberton into an international symbol of entitled racism. David Williams was in his corner office on the 52nd floor of Williams Aviation Headquarters in Manhattan, watching the situation unfold in real time across multiple screens. Social media, feeds, news alerts, and stock price monitors painted a picture of corporate crisis management in motion. His assistant, Rebecca Torres, knocked on the doorframe. "Mr. Williams, I have airline CEO Robert Harrison holding on line 1. He says it's urgent." David had been expecting the call. He picked up his desk phone with a slight smile. "Robert, I assume you're calling about Flight 880. Robert Harrison's voice was strained with barely controlled panic. "David, what the hell happened on that plane? My PR department is melting down. Our stock price has dropped 12% in the last 2 hours." "What happened," David said calmly, "is that your crew racially profiled my daughter and threatened to have her arrested for sitting in her assigned seat. I understand there was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Robert. There was bias. Pure, documented, live-streamed bias. Your flight attendant called security on a Royal Key passenger because she was young and black." Robert's silence stretched for 10 seconds. "David, you know how much our partnership means to both companies. Williams Aviation and our airline have been working together for 15 years, and that relationship is exactly why this is so disappointing," David replied. "I trusted your airline with my daughter's safety, and your crew turned her into a spectacle for their own prejudices." Rebecca knocked again and slipped a note across David's desk. "CNN wants a statement. Fox News holding on line 3. BBC requesting interview." Robert David continued, "I'm looking at media requests from around the world. This story isn't going away. Your crew made my daughter famous for being discriminated against. How do you plan to fix that?" "Tell me what you want," Robert said desperately. "Full apology. Financial compensation. We'll fire the entire crew." David looked out his office window at the Manhattan skyline. "You're missing the point. This isn't about money or apologies. It's about the fact that your employees see a young black woman in first class and automatically assume she doesn't belong there." On his computer screen, David was scrolling through social media posts about the incident. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of Zara, but they also revealed how common her experience was. "This happened to me on Delta last year. Same thing on United. They questioned my military ID flying while black is apparently a crime. At least she had her dad's backing. Robert David said, I'm terminating our leasing contracts for all Williams Aviation aircraft in your fleet. That's 42 planes worth approximately $800 million in assets." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "David, please, let's talk about this rationally. One incident doesn't represent our entire company culture. One incident that was live-streamed to 500,000 people, David corrected. One incident where your captain, your lead flight attendant, and your cabin crew all sided with racial bias over company policy." Rebecca knocked again. "Sir Williams Aviation stock is up 18%. Apparently, investors are supporting your stance." David smiled grimly. "Robert, I'm also calling an emergency meeting with the boards of every airline that leases Williams aircraft. We're implementing mandatory bias training accountability protocols and zero-tolerance policies. Any airline that doesn't comply loses their Williams Aviation partnerships. You're going to restructure the entire industry because of one passenger dispute. I'm going to restructure the industry because my daughter shouldn't have to prove she belongs in a seat she paid for," David replied. "Because Royal Key status shouldn't depend on skin color. Because dignity isn't negotiable at any altitude." David's phone buzzed with a text from Zara Dad. "I'm seeing the news coverage. Don't destroy the whole airline for me." He texted back, "Not destroying anything, Bug. Just making sure it never happens again." Robert's voice came back through the speaker, defeated. "What do you need from us?" "Carmen Rodriguez terminated immediately. Captain Bradley terminated immediately. Any supervisor who signed off on their discriminatory policies terminated. Full public apology acknowledging racial profiling. And $1 billion fund for aviation equality training across the industry. $1 billion. It's less than your market cap loss from this incident," David pointed out, "and it's exactly what comprehensive change costs." Rebecca handed David another note, Zara's calling, on line 4. "Robert, I have to take a call from my daughter. Think about my terms. You have 24 hours to respond before I make the contract termination public." David switched lines. "Hey, Bug, how are you holding up Dad? This is getting crazy. People are calling me a hero for sitting in my seat." "You are a hero," David said. "Not for sitting in your seat, but for not backing down when they tried to make you feel like you didn't deserve it." Through his office window, David could see protesters gathering in the plaza below. Some held signs reading, "Justice for Zara." Others read, "Dignity in the skies." The movement was already bigger than one incident on one plane. "Zara, I need to ask you something important," David said. "This story is going to follow you for a while. College applications, job interviews, dating. People are going to know who you are. Are you okay with that?" Zara was quiet for a moment. In the background, David could hear the ambient noise of the aircraft cabin. "Dad, do you know how many people have texted me saying this happened to them too? That they just took it because they didn't want to cause a scene? A lot, I imagine. Maybe me not backing down helps someone else stand up next time." David felt his chest tighten with pride. "Bug, you just changed the aviation industry. I hope you're ready for what comes next. Are you going to be okay? I know this is costing you business relationships." David laughed. "Zara Williams. Aviation stock is at an all-time high. Turns out investors like companies that stand up for what's right. I'm getting partnership requests from airlines around the world who want to prove they're better than this." Rebecca knocked once more, holding a tablet showing breaking news coverage. "Sir, the president just tweeted about the incident. He's calling for DOT investigation into airline discrimination practices." David's phone buzzed with another call. "Bug, I've got to go. The president's office is calling. Apparently, your story made it all the way to the White House." "Dad." "Yeah, I love you. Thank you for having my back. Always, Bug. Always," as David ended the call and prepared to speak with the White House. Flight AV 880 was crossing the Atlantic at 37,000 feet. In Seat 1, Zara Williams was sketching the clouds outside her window, unaware that her quiet refusal to be intimidated had just sparked a global conversation about dignity, respect, and the true cost of bias. The drawing she was working on would become the logo for the Williams Foundation for Aviation Equality, established 6 months later with a $2 billion endowment from her father. But that was still in the future. For now, she was just a 19-year-old art student flying to London, sketching clouds, and hoping her story might help someone else find the courage to stand their ground when the world tried to make them feel small. The story broke worldwide before Victoria Pemberton's Uber reached her house in the Hamptons. By the time her husband Charles arrived home from his emergency board meeting, first class, Karen was the #1 trending topic across 3 continents. Victoria was being called the face of flying privilege, and her public meltdown was being dissected frame by frame across social media platforms. Charles found Victoria in their master bedroom, surrounded by empty tissues and scrolling frantically through her phone, watching her reputation disintegrate in real time. "Charles, thank God you're home," Victoria said, jumping up from the bed. "You have to call your lawyers. That girl and her father are destroying us with lies. This is defamation." Charles set down his briefcase with deliberate care. His face was grim, aged 10 years in the past 4 hours. "Victoria, I've spent the afternoon in crisis meetings with our board, our investors, and our legal team," he said quietly. "There's no defamation case here." "What do you mean? They're making me look like a racist." "They're not making you look like anything," Charles replied. "You did this to yourself, on camera, in front of hundreds of thousands of witnesses." Victoria's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had created a Wikipedia page for her titled Victoria Pemberton, Aviation Discrimination Incident. She was officially internet famous for all the wrong reasons. "Charles, you have to fix this. Call your friends at the network. Get the story buried. Use your influence." Charles sat heavily on their California king bed. Victoria Pemberton Logistics stock has dropped 40% since this afternoon. "We've had 3 major clients terminate their contracts. FedEx is reviewing our partnership. Ford canceled our automotive parts deal." Victoria stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. That's impossible. This was just one argument on one airplane. One argument that was live-streamed to the world, Charles corrected. One argument where you accused a teenager of credit card fraud based on her race. One argument where you demanded special treatment because you couldn't handle sitting next to a black girl. Down the hall, their housekeeper Maria was quietly packing her belongings. She had heard every word of Victoria's phone calls throughout the day, had watched the viral videos, and had made her decision. She left her resignation letter on the kitchen counter and walked out the front door without saying goodbye. Victoria's phone rang. Her sister Jennifer was calling from Ohio. "Jen, thank God. I need you to issue a statement defending me. Tell people this is being blown out of proportion." Jennifer's voice was cold. "I'm not issuing any statements. I'm also not taking any more of your calls. My kids are being bullied at school because of you. Their friends' parents won't let them come over. You've made our entire family toxic." The line went dead. Charles was on his laptop reading the latest news coverage. David Williams just gave an interview to CNN. He's calling for congressional hearings on airline discrimination. The Department of Transportation is opening an investigation. "He's overreacting," Victoria protested. "I never said anything racist." Charles turned his laptop screen toward her. "Victoria, watch your own behavior." He clicked play on the CNN interview. David Williams appeared on screen composed and articulate, sitting in his corporate office with the Manhattan skyline behind him. "Anderson, my daughter is a sophomore at Parsons School of Design. She's 19 years old, she's brilliant, and she's never hurt anyone in her life. Yesterday, she was humiliated on a commercial aircraft because a crew decided that her skin color made her less worthy of first-class service. Mr. Williams, some people are saying your response has been excessive. You've terminated hundreds of millions in aircraft leasing contracts. Anderson, what's excessive is asking a teenager to prove she belongs in a seat she paid for. What's excessive is calling security on a Royal Key passenger because another passenger threw a tantrum. What's excessive is the fact that this happens to black travelers every single day, and most of them don't have the resources to fight back." Victoria watched in horror as David Williams demolished every excuse she might have used. "Mr. Williams, Mrs. Pemberton claims she has a medical condition requiring window seating. Anderson, if Mrs. Pemberton has a legitimate medical condition, she should book window seats. She shouldn't demand that other passengers give up their assigned seats. And she certainly shouldn't question how a black teenager could afford first-class travel." Charles closed the laptop. "Victoria, that interview has been viewed 12 million times in the last 2 hours. David Williams is worth approximately $8 billion. He owns or leases aircraft to every major airline in North America. You picked a fight with one of the most powerful men in aviation." Victoria's world was collapsing faster than she could comprehend. "Charles, what are we going to do?" Charles stood up and walked to their walk-in closet. He emerged with a suitcase and began packing methodically. Charles said quietly. "There is no we anymore." Victoria watched in stunned silence as her husband of 22 years folded shirts and placed them in luggage. "Charles, what are you doing?" "I'm leaving you, Victoria. My lawyers will contact your lawyers about the divorce proceedings." "You can't leave me. This will blow over." Charles stopped packing and looked at his wife directly. "Victoria, in the last 6 hours I've received calls from our country club asking us to resign our membership. Our children's private school has requested a meeting to discuss your values alignment with their institution. The charity board you chair voted to remove you in an emergency session. The yacht club has revoked our privileges." He resumed packing. "But the real reason I'm leaving isn't the social humiliation or the financial losses," Charles continued. "It's because I watched you try to destroy a teenager's dignity because you wanted her seat. And even now, after everything that's happened, you still think you were right." Victoria began crying real tears this time. "Charles, please. We can get through this together." "No, we can't," Charles said firmly, "because I finally see who you really are, and I don't want to be married to that person." Charles's phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. "Prenup is ironclad. Victoria gets minimal assets. Papers can be filed tomorrow." Victoria's own phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, death threats, reporters requesting interviews, memes using her image, job recruiters rescinding offers she had been considering. An hour later, Charles was gone. Victoria was alone in their 8-bedroom house, surrounded by the luxuries that would soon belong to lawyers and creditors. She turned on the television, hoping to find coverage that painted her in a more sympathetic light. Instead, she found herself watching the evening news coverage of her own destruction. Tonight, the story of a viral airplane confrontation has sparked a national conversation about privilege and discrimination in air travel. Victoria Pemberton, wife of shipping magnate Charles Pemberton, is facing widespread criticism after videos showed her demanding that a black teenager give up her first-class seat. The anchor continued. Meanwhile, Zara Williams has become an unexpected symbol of grace under pressure. The Parsons art student maintained her composure throughout the confrontation and has declined all interview requests, instead releasing a simple statement thanking supporters and calling for kindness in travel. Victoria threw the remote control across the room where it shattered against the wall. Outside, news vans were arriving in her neighborhood. Reporters were setting up cameras on the public street hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had become the face of airline entitlement. Her phone rang again. This time, it was her lawyer. Victoria, I need to advise you that several class action suits are being filed against you for creating a hostile environment for minority travelers. Additionally, there's a federal investigation into whether your actions constitute a civil rights violation. Victoria hung up without responding. She walked to her bedroom window and looked out at the gathering media circus. Tomorrow, she would wake up divorced, broke, and infamous. But tonight, she was still trying to understand how demanding a window seat had cost her everything she thought mattered. 3,000 miles away, Zara Williams was fast asleep in Seat 1A as Flight AV 880 crossed the dark Atlantic. Her sketchbook lay open on her lap, showing a half-finished drawing of clouds and sky. She had no idea that her quiet dignity had just changed the aviation industry forever. Flight AV 880 landed at London Heathrow 6 hours behind schedule, but the delay meant nothing compared to what was waiting on the ground. As passengers began deplaning, Zara gathered her sketchbook and backpack, moving with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. The Hispanic businessman from 2A approached her as they waited in the aisle. "Miss Williams," he said quietly, "I'm Miguel Santos, CEO of Santos International. What you did today took incredible courage. I have daughters your age, and I hope they would handle themselves with half your grace." He handed her a business card. "If you ever need anything, legal support, job references, anything, please call me." The elderly couple from 1C stopped to shake her hand. "Dear," the woman said, with tears in her eyes, "we should have spoken up sooner. Thank you for showing us what dignity looks like." As Zara walked through the jet bridge towards customs, she could see news crews waiting in the terminal. Her phone had hundreds of messages, interview requests, support from strangers, and scholarship offers from art schools around the world. But she slipped through a side exit with the help of airport security, avoiding the media entirely. She had no interest in becoming a celebrity for being discriminated against. Meanwhile, back in New York, the consequences were swift and severe. Carmen Rodriguez cleaned out her locker at JFK at 6 a.m., 3 hours before her termination meeting. 20 years of service ended with a form letter and an escort to the parking garage. Her supervisor handed her final paycheck with barely concealed disgust. "Carmen, you know this didn't have to happen," her supervisor said. "You had the policies memorized. You knew better." Carmen nodded, unable to speak. She had thrown away her career and her pension because she couldn't see past her own assumptions about who belonged in first class. Captain Thomas Bradley lasted 1 day longer. His termination hearing was a formality. The video evidence was overwhelming, and the airline's insurance company was demanding his removal to limit liability exposure. At 54, Thomas faced the reality that his flying career was over. No airline would hire a captain terminated for discrimination. His 40-year dream of aviation had ended because he chose bias over policy. The airline's stock price stabilized after CEO Robert Harrison announced comprehensive reforms, mandatory bias training for all employees' hidden camera programs to monitor crew behavior, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. But the real changes were happening at Williams Aviation headquarters. David Williams announced the creation of the Williams Foundation for Aviation Equality, funded with a $2 billion endowment. The foundation would provide scholarships for underrepresented students pursuing aviation careers, fund discrimination prevention programs, and support passengers who faced bias while traveling. Within 72 hours of the incident, David had received partnership requests from airlines around the world, all eager to prove they were better than the company that had discriminated against his daughter. Victoria Pemberton's life continued its downward spiral with mechanical precision. The divorce papers were served while she was still in her bathrobe reading about herself in the morning news. Charles had moved quickly and efficiently using their prenuptial agreement to minimize her settlement. Pemberton Logistics declared bankruptcy within a week. The company Charles had spent 30 years building couldn't survive the association with his ex-wife's viral racism. 200 employees lost their jobs, and Charles lost everything except his determination to rebuild far away from Victoria's shadow. The house in the Hamptons went up for sale immediately. Victoria's designer clothing and jewelry were liquidated to pay legal fees. Her social media accounts remained deactivated. Any attempt to resurface online was met with an immediate barrage of criticism and memes. But perhaps the most telling consequence was the simple fact that Victoria Pemberton had become unemployable. Her name was permanently associated with entitlement and discrimination. Background checks revealed the viral video. Reference calls went unreturned. The woman, who had once demanded special treatment because of her husband's wealth, was now working part-time at a department store in Ohio, living with her sister who barely tolerated her presence. 6 months after the incident, Victoria was recognized while working her retail shift. A teenage customer pointed at her and said loudly, "Oh my God, you're first-class Karen." The video of Victoria's humiliation at the cash register went viral again, a reminder that the internet never forgets. Zara, meanwhile, was thriving. Her Instagram following had grown from 300 to over 2 million, all drawn to her art rather than her fame. Fashion brands reached out for collaborations. Art galleries requested exhibitions. Scholarship offers poured in from the world's top design schools. But Zara remained focused on her work. She used her platform to showcase other young artists of color, turning her unexpected fame into opportunities for people who looked like her. The sketchbook from Flight AV 880 became the centerpiece of her first solo exhibition, Altitude and Attitude Dignity at 30,000 feet. The drawing she had made during the confrontation sold for $50,000, with all proceeds donated to legal aid organizations fighting travel discrimination. The exhibition's opening night was attended by David Williams, Miguel Santos, the elderly couple from 1C, and hundreds of supporters who had followed Zara's story from its viral beginning. As Zara spoke to the crowd about finding art in adversity, about maintaining dignity under pressure, about the importance of standing up for what's right, the audience listened with the reverence usually reserved for heroes, which, in a way, was exactly what she had become. The first-class cabin of Flight AV 880 looked exactly the same as it had 6 months earlier, but everything else had changed. Zara Williams settled into Seat 1A for her return flight to New York, marking exactly 6 months since the incident that had transformed her life and reformed an industry. This time, there were no confused looks from crew members, no questions about her legitimacy, no demands for additional verification. This time, the lead flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah Chen, recognized her immediately. "Miss Williams, welcome aboard," Sarah said with genuine warmth. "I wanted to personally thank you for what you did. I'm Asian American, and I faced my own challenges in aviation. Your courage made things better for all of us. The changes extended far beyond individual attitudes." Every crew member now wore a small pin reading "Dignity in Flight," a symbol of their commitment to the Williams Foundation's equality standards. Hidden cameras monitored cabin interactions with footage reviewed by independent bias detection specialists. The airline had invested over $500 million in cultural reformation, turning the Zara Williams incident from a liability into a competitive advantage. They were now marketed as the most inclusive airline in the world, and their bookings from diverse passengers had increased by 40%. Zara pulled out her sketchbook. A new one, leather-bound with her initials embossed in gold, a gift from her father. She was working on designs for her upcoming collaboration with a major fashion brand, a line of travel wear that combined comfort with style, marketed with the tagline, "Travel with dignity, arrive in style." Her phone buzzed with a text from David Bugg, saw the quarterly reports. Passenger satisfaction up 25% since we implemented the new training. You changed the culture, proud of you. Zara smiled and typed back, I just wanted a seat, Dad, but I'll take the win. 3 rows behind her, a young black businessman named Marcus Johnson was settling into his first-class seat for the first time in his life. He had seen Zara's story, had been inspired by her grace under pressure, and had finally saved enough money to treat himself to premium travel. The flight attendant welcomed him warmly, offered him champagne, and made no assumptions about his right to be there. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Marcus sent a text to his girlfriend, "First class is amazing, and no one questioned whether I belong here. Things really have changed." Across the Atlantic, Victoria Pemberton was stocking shelves at a Target in suburban Ohio. At 47, she had lost everything: her marriage, her money, her social status, and her sense of self. The prenuptial agreement had left her with minimal assets, just enough to rent a small apartment and survive on part-time retail wages. Her sister, Jennifer, had made it clear that Victoria's stay was temporary. "You can live in my basement until you get back on your feet," Jennifer had said, "but I won't have my children exposed to your attitudes." Victoria's days followed a mind-numbing routine: wake up at 5 a.m., work an 8-hour shift arranging merchandise, and dealing with customers who sometimes recognized her return to her sister's basement, and scroll through social media watching her former friends live the life she had lost. The country club had permanently revoked her membership. Her former charity board had renamed their annual gala to specifically exclude any association with her legacy. The private school her stepchildren attended had requested that Charles change their last name to avoid embarrassing other families. But perhaps the cruelest irony was that Victoria had become a case study in business schools across the country. MBA students analyzed her viral meltdown as an example of how personal bias could destroy corporate value. Her face appeared in PowerPoint presentations about reputation management and crisis communication. The Pemberton effect had entered academic lexicon as a term for the exponential damage that could result from public displays of discrimination in the social media age. Victoria's attempts to rehabilitate her image had failed spectacularly. A YouTube apology video was so widely mocked that she took it down after 24 hours. A magazine interview where she claimed to be the real victim sparked another wave of criticism that lasted for weeks. The truth was that Victoria had never truly understood what she had done wrong. In her mind, she had simply asked for what she wanted: the window seat she preferred. The fact that her request came at the expense of a black teenager's dignity was something she couldn't quite grasp. During her lunch break at Target, Victoria sometimes searched for news about Zara Williams. She watched with bitter envy as the young woman she had tried to humiliate received scholarship offers, art exhibition opportunities, and collaboration deals worth millions. Zara's success felt like a personal insult to Victoria, proof that the world was unfairly rewarding someone who should have simply moved when asked. Carmen Rodriguez had landed at rock bottom even faster than Victoria. Terminated from the airline with cause, she was ineligible for unemployment benefits and blacklisted from aviation jobs. At 52, she was working double shifts at an airport Starbucks serving coffee to the same types of passengers she used to supervise. The irony wasn't lost on her former colleagues. Carmen, who had once wielded authority over first-class cabins, now took orders from teenagers and cleaned up spills for minimum wage. Her apartment in Queens was a studio barely large enough for a bed and a kitchen table. The walls were thin, and she could hear her neighbors arguing through the drywall. It was a far cry from the suburban house she had lost when she couldn't make mortgage payments. Carmen's downfall had been documented by aviation industry publications as a cautionary tale about the real costs of workplace discrimination. Her 20-year career had been reduced to a single viral moment of bias that defined her professional legacy. Sometimes, during her Starbucks shifts, Carmen would see news coverage of the Williams Foundation's latest initiatives. The organization had distributed over $50 million in scholarships and bias prevention programs, funding positive changes across the aviation industry. She wondered what her life would look like if she had simply checked Zara's royal key status and treated her with standard first-class courtesy. 20 seconds of basic professional service would have saved her career, her home, and her dignity. But that possibility existed only in an alternate universe where bias didn't cloud judgment and assumptions didn't override training. Captain Thomas Bradley had moved to a small farm in Montana, as far from commercial aviation as he could get. At 54, he was unemployable in the industry where he had spent his entire adult life. The Federal Aviation Administration had not revoked his pilot's license, but no airline would hire a captain associated with high-profile discrimination. Thomas spent his days repairing farm equipment and his evenings reading about the industry he could no longer join. He followed news of the Williams Foundation's aviation equality initiatives with a mixture of admiration and regret. In quiet moments, he wondered how different things might have been if he had simply asked to see both boarding passes before making assumptions. Professional neutrality would have revealed the truth Zara belonged in one, A. Victoria belonged in 1B, and the entire confrontation could have been avoided. But professional neutrality had been overwhelmed by unconscious bias, and the consequences had been swift and irreversible. David Williams had become an unlikely hero in the fight for travel equality. His congressional testimony about airline discrimination had led to federal legislation requiring bias reporting and prevention training. The Williams Foundation had partnerships with airlines on 6 continents, creating industry-wide standards for inclusive service. But David's greatest pride wasn't in the corporate reforms or the billions of dollars in social impact investments. It was in watching his daughter handle her unexpected fame with the same grace she had shown during the original confrontation. Zara had used her platform to amplify other voices, to create opportunities for young artists who looked like her, and to prove that dignity wasn't determined by volume or aggression. As Flight AV 880 reached cruising altitude, Zara looked out the window at the same view she had sketched 6 months earlier. The clouds looked identical, but the world below had changed in ways both large and small. A young black businessman was enjoying his first-class experience without harassment. Flight crews across the globe were treating passengers with increased respect and awareness. Discrimination complaints had dropped by 60% as airlines competed to meet Williams Foundation standards. Zara opened her sketchbook and began drawing the scene outside her window once more. This time, she wasn't documenting confrontation or capturing conflict. She was simply appreciating the view from 37,000 feet, the miracle of flight, and the knowledge that the sky was a little more welcoming for everyone who looked like her. The drawing would become the final piece in her traveling exhibition, a symbol of how far the aviation industry had come in just 6 months. It was also a reminder that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with someone simply refusing to give up their seat. 1 year after the incident that changed everything, Zara Williams was back in the same first-class cabin in the same seat on the same route. But this time she wasn't alone. Beside her in seat 1B sat Maria Santos, a 17-year-old Latina artist from Los Angeles, who had won the Williams Foundation's first annual scholarship for promising young creators from underrepresented communities. In 1C and 1D were James and Patricia Mitchell, the elderly couple who had witnessed the original confrontation and had since become major donors to aviation equality causes. This wasn't just a flight. It was the inaugural journey of what David Williams had termed the Dignity Route, a celebration flight that would occur annually to commemorate the changes sparked by one teenager's refusal to be intimidated. As they settled in for takeoff, Zara reflected on how much had changed since that day when Victoria Pemberton had demanded her seat. The Williams Foundation had distributed over $200 million in scholarships, bias prevention training, and legal support for travelers who faced discrimination. Airlines around the world had adopted the Williams Standards, a comprehensive framework for inclusive service that had become the gold standard for the industry. More importantly, the culture of aviation had shifted. Flight crews now underwent quarterly bias training. Passenger complaints about discrimination had dropped by 70%. Young travelers of color reported feeling more welcomed and respected in premium cabins. Miss Williams-Maria said quietly, "I just wanted to say thank you. My parents work in hotels and they've always faced assumptions about where we belong. What you did made it easier for people like me to take up space without apologizing for it." Zara smiled. "You don't need to thank me. I was just sitting in my seat." "But you stayed in your seat," James Mitchell added from across the aisle. "Patricia and I have talked about this for months. We should have stood up for you immediately, but we were cowards. You showed us what courage looks like." The flight attendant approaching their row was Sarah Chen, who had worked the Williams Foundation route since its inception. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard this special anniversary flight. As we prepare for takeoff, I want to acknowledge that all of us in aviation are better because of what happened in this cabin 1 year ago." Sarah had become something of a legend in the industry. After Zara's incident, she had founded the Flight Crew Alliance for Inclusive Service, an organization that provided bias training and accountability support for aviation professionals. Her work had earned her recognition from the Department of Transportation and a personal meeting with the president. Today's flight carries 180 passengers. Sarah continued including 45 scholarship recipients from the Williams Foundation, 12 crew members who completed advanced bias prevention certification, and 23 passengers who were themselves victims of travel discrimination and are now advocates for change. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Zara opened her newest sketchbook. This one was different from her personal collection. It would become part of the Smithsonian's permanent exhibition on civil rights in the digital age. The original sketch from her confrontation with Victoria Pemberton was now displayed in the National Museum of African American History and Culture, alongside artifacts from the Montgomery bus boycott and other pivotal moments in transportation equality. But this sketch would capture something different: progress, hope, and the view from a world where dignity wasn't negotiable. "Miss Williams," a voice said from across the aisle. Zara looked up to see a middle-aged black woman she didn't recognize. "I'm Dr. Angela Foster, and I just wanted you to know that my daughter flew first class for the first time last month. She was nervous about potential discrimination, but the crew treated her like royalty. She said she felt safe because of what you did." Similar stories reached Zara weekly. Parents wrote to thank her for making travel safer for their children. Business professionals shared stories of increased respect in premium cabins. Young people of color reported feeling more confident about taking up space in environments where they might have previously felt unwelcome. The ripple effects extended far beyond aviation. Hotels, restaurants, and other service industries had adopted Williams-style training programs. Business schools taught case studies about how inclusive practices improved both customer satisfaction and financial performance. Victoria Pemberton had inadvertently become a catalyst for the exact opposite of what she intended. Her attempt to diminish Zara's dignity had instead elevated the conversation about respect and belonging to a national level. As Flight AV 880 reached cruising altitude, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now at 37,000 feet, the same altitude where Zara Williams proved that dignity flies higher than prejudice. Today's flight time to London will be approximately 7 hours, the same time it takes to change an industry when you refuse to accept discrimination as normal." Zara looked out the window at the familiar view of clouds and sky. She had sketched this scene hundreds of times now, but it never lost its power to inspire her. The vastness of the sky served as a reminder that there was room for everyone to rise. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "Bug just saw the congressional report. Travel discrimination incidents down 68% since the foundation launched. You didn't just change one flight, you changed the entire sky." Zara texted back, "We changed it together, Dad, all of us. And that was perhaps the most important lesson of the entire experience. Change hadn't come from one person's courage alone, but from a community of people who decided that Zara's dignity was worth defending. Miguel Santos had used his influence to pressure other airlines to adopt inclusive policies. The elderly Mitchells had become major philanthropists for travel equality. Sarah Chen and her fellow flight attendants had transformed crew culture from the inside. David Williams had leveraged his corporate power to create industry-wide standards. Even passengers who had simply shared the viral video or donated small amounts to the foundation had played a part in the transformation. As the aircraft flew through the afternoon sky, Zara began sketching one final image for the anniversary collection. It wasn't a portrait or a landscape, but a simple drawing of hands, different colors, ages, and backgrounds, all reaching toward the same horizon. The caption would read, "We all deserve to fly with dignity." 3 hours into the flight, Zara received an unexpected message. It was from Carmen Rodriguez, the former flight attendant, whose bias had sparked the entire incident. "Miss Williams, I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I've been following your foundation's work. I volunteer at a community center now teaching bias awareness to young people. I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to make sure others learn from my mistakes. Thank you for turning my worst moment into something meaningful." Zara showed the message to Maria Santos, who read it with wide eyes. "Are you going to respond?" Maria asked. Zara considered the question. Carmen's message represented something important, the possibility of redemption, growth, and learning from failure. Not everyone who made mistakes was willing to acknowledge them or work to do better. She typed a brief response, "Thank you for doing the work to become better." That's all any of us can do. As Flight AV 880 began its descent toward London, Zara closed her sketchbook and reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had never wanted to be famous for being discriminated against, but she had used that unwanted platform to create something meaningful. The Williams Foundation had changed policies and procedures, but more importantly, it had changed hearts and minds. Young people of color no longer had to wonder if they belonged in first class. They knew they did. Crew members now saw passengers as individuals rather than stereotypes. Airlines competed to demonstrate their commitment to inclusion. The sky, which had once felt hostile to people who looked like Zara, now welcomed them with dignity and respect. As the aircraft touched down at Heathrow, Zara felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with one woman's refusal to give up her seat had closed with an entire industry's commitment to ensuring that no one would be asked to give up their dignity again. The final sketch in her anniversary collection would remain blank, its emptiness representing infinite possibility. The promise that there were still stories to be told, progress to be made, and skies to be conquered by anyone brave enough to take flight. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes. Zara Williams had proven that you don't need to raise your voice to make the whole world listen. You just need to know who you are and refuse to let anyone make you forget it. If this story moved, you remember that dignity isn't negotiable at any altitude. Stand up for yourself and others who deserve respect. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of justice and courage, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters. Your engagement helps us reach more people with these important messages about standing up for what's right. Remember, the next time someone underestimates you, let them. Then show them who's really in control of their own destiny. Until next time, keep standing up for dignity, respect, and justice at any altitude.